Hello and welcome to CATSweek. I'm Annalise Poorman. At the January 24th Bloomington City Council meeting, Councilmember Dave Rollo shared his concerns about recent Indiana legislation that would allow developers to build on slopes that are steeper than the current Monroe County zoning codes allow. He explained that there will be environmental consequences, specifically to the Lake Monroe Reservoir.
If one just looks at a topographic map of Monroe County, especially to the east, you can see that most of the slopes, there are tremendous numbers of slopes exceeding 15%, up to 25% in the Lake Monroe watershed. So this is going to essentially spell siltation of our reservoir. And this is ostensibly to increase housing, which is a ruse. It's a trick. I would argue there's no housing that's going to be built on a 24% slope except for probably a McMansion overlooking the ravine. This is not for affordability. It's not for increasing supply. It's basically for development interests. And unfortunately, they have far too much sway at the State House. So I'll be putting together a letter for the council, if you care to sign it, to plead with our Senate and our governor to veto, or the Senate not to approve this bill, because this has direct implications for our well-being.
The only item on the council's agenda for the meeting was to transfer funds from the Motor Vehicle Highway Restricted Street Fund into the Motor Vehicle Highway Fund, and to additionally appropriate ARPA state and local fiscal recovery fund expenditures that had not already otherwise been appropriated for 2024. Corporation Counsel Margie Rice expounded on the appropriation ordinance.
Tonight I'm asking for permission for one additional appropriation and a transfer, and I'll give a summarize kind of what's in your packet. I will tell you on the additional appropriation, we have a couple representatives from United Way here if you want to ask them any questions about it. So essentially during COVID times, the city decided to give $2.7 million to United Way to deal with housing issues. There weren't a lot of details in that agreement. The $1.2 million was already given to United Way. There was another $1.5 that was going to be given later in a second installment, and accidentally, the end of last year, the Comptroller's office closed that purchase order out. So they contacted the state, and the state said, you're going to have to get an additional appropriation for that remaining 1.5, which is why I'm here. We also, during the transition, Beth Kate and I had some conversations, and she said, hey, that kind of bare bones agreement that we had on the ARPA funding needs to be renewed, extended, and a detail about the ARPA restrictions need to be added. So Beth was great in the transition. She, and ARPA has sort of shifted, you know, there's been a lot of guidance changing as it comes down from Washington. And so Beth drafted a preliminary amendment for me to review, and it said it really needed to be done by January 31st. Which I've met with United Way, I've talked with Mary Morgan and with Randy, they're both here tonight. We may do an extension, give ourselves a little bit more time than January 31st to work on that larger amendment. But so what I'll do is we'll just do a real quick, hey, we agree to you know, another month to work on this. And then we'll have a beefed up agreement that's got the ARPA language, because essentially we're responsible for reporting how we spend that ARPA language, so we need to make sure any subrecipient also understands those reporting requirements and agrees to them. And we want to have more detail in the subrecipient agreement and the agreement with United Way about exactly how they intend to spend the balance of the $2.7 million.
The next Bloomington City Council meeting will be held on January 31st. At the Monroe County Commissioners meeting on January 24th, Health Department Director Lori Kelly gave an update on influenza cases in the region.
In Indiana, influenza is now noted as being at moderate levels. There have been 13 influenza-associated deaths in Indiana since January 13th. COVID wastewater concentrations have continued to see small increases, but emergency room visits have decreased. We do still have COVID and flu vaccines available. You can call 812-353-3244 for an appointment.
Next, Chief Deputy Phil Parker gave a department update on the jail facilities, which he clarified did not have any heating issues during the cold spell.
Got lots and lots of phone calls over last week when the center was closed about the heat in the jail. I'll make it very clear, we had no heat issues in the jail at all. So we were very, very grateful for that. But I want to put the public's mind to ease that actually, you know, that building is, you can't figure it out. It's, we were overly warm on a couple of those floors there. It got really hot. So I don't know if the heat got diverted or whatever, but there were no issues. So everybody can feel safe that nobody was cold in the facility.
Although they did not have any heating issues, he shared that they do have other infrastructure issues, the most recent one being the plumbing.
We had a hot water issue here, and it affected K Block, the inmate worker dorms, and the first floor dorm. So Dave and his crew diagnosed that. And so what happened here is we replaced the mixing valves. Still no hot water. Like, oh, okay. We replaced the hot water controls there. It's this little cubby hole. I know exactly where it's at. It's right outside my office, actually, but no hot water. So this makes my point. So what we found was there was a section of piping that we found that had scaled in and had narrowed to the point that there wasn't hardly any water. So it affected the pressure. And by the time the water got to where it was going to be, it had turned cold. So we've got it corrected. But that's the type of thing that we fight every single day in that facility. We replaced all of the kitchen valve, or kitchen faucet, all the valve stems, every one of them were leaking. So those have all been replaced over the last couple weeks. That in turn causes leaks down below. You know, water goes down most of the time. Then we made repairs to D block, and what had happened is the pass-through doors between blocks, with those doors opening and closing over the years, the actual blocks had become dislodged, and we had to come up with an innovative way to shore up those doors so that the concrete blocks would hold true, where we could maintain separation between those blocks. So, you know, I don't want to go on and on about this, but I think we're getting the drift here, right? Shower repairs are ongoing and constant. The showers are so broken down that every time we fix them, we know it's a Band-Aid. We know it, but the water, the bases separate from the walls. They have to be sealed back up, then they'll separate again. There's no way to hold tight to them. So those are the types of things, and that's just a small list of what that facility presents to us every single day. And I'm not sitting here complaining about it, but I think it's noteworthy that we all know what we're dealing with there in terms of how the facility is affecting operations in that jail and what we've got to do every day just to keep in front of it.
Later in the meeting, the commissioners heard from County Attorney Jeff Cockerell about a memorandum of understanding with the community kitchen to help fund their new facility.
Before you is a memorandum of understanding with the community kitchen. On the cover sheet, it indicates that we were working on some of the provisions for the auditing. That is in what you currently have, Section 4. And so it just kind of goes through the different scenarios that may fall into. I think the biggest one that I wasn't aware of is the entity annual report E1. Community kitchen already files those, so they don't have any problems with that. We do not anticipate that they are going to get more than $750,000 in federal money, but it is only January, and if they maybe have some good luck, they may have to. So we have those requirements in there as well. They will be a subrecipient of ours, and so it also indicates that they have a 3-year term where they have to make sure that all the documents and materials that we may need for an audit, they have to maintain for that period of time. This was appropriated last night by the county council. And so what we are doing is we are reimbursing some of their expenses to free up their cash flow so that they can continue with their kitchen project.
Commissioner Penny Giffens shared her support for the new facility.
I'm really pleased that we're able to do this, especially knowing that that part of this will help them to fund a new facility, right? Because it reimburses them and a facility in an area where they'll serve lower income families, and we've had multiple discussions about how this impacts kids, child development, things like that. And so I'm really proud that we are able to do this. It's an infrastructure addition to our community that will be there for decades to come.
The commissioners unanimously approved the Memorandum of Understanding. During department updates at the Monroe County Council meeting on January 23rd, the Sheriff's Department Financial Coordinator, Jordan Miller, presented the semi-annual Commissary Fund report.
I'm here today, or this evening, to discuss the commissary summary for the second portion of 2023. I'll start off by mentioning the balance as of July 1st was $110,614.80. There were $103,497.83 worth of receipts, $173,015.38 worth of expenditures, with an ending balance of $41,519.27. I figured it might be beneficial to just kind of go over some of the larger expenditures, starting with equipment. It's approximately 52.5% of that $173,000 and change. Primarily inmate clothing, hygiene products, blankets, things of the like. Bob Barker was probably the biggest vendor that we use for those types of equipment items. And then, of course, some Nelson & Company and handcuffs, things of that sort from from Galls that were for our pullos, pants, flashlights, things like that. The next item or next expenditure was the tech equipment, which was approximately 23.9%. And those were for things such as hosted WinScribe subscription, basically protection and things of that sort. I'm sure individuals up there might be able to explain that a little bit better than myself, but security and such for servers and databases, things of that need. And finally, just commissary inventory is a large, approximately 15% of those expenses, which is primarily pouches, e-cigs, and beverages from Pepsi Cola. So at this point, I have listed things by categories. I didn't choose to go into detail about some of the more obvious ones, such as inmate haircuts and document destruction. But if you might have any particular or specific questions, I'd be glad to answer any of those that might arise.
Councilmember Marty Hawk said that the transparency of the report serves to show the public that the Sheriff's Department is being run well.
Yes, it's important that you share this information with the public because it is one of the places that sheriffs can get in trouble if they are of a mind to do that. I'm so glad we don't have that problem here. But this is showing the public that we don't have the problem here, and we are not trying to hide anything that's going on with the finances, because this is a budget that does not require appropriation. So you wouldn't be required to, tell us routinely as often as you might. But I expect anytime anybody wants to ask you about this, that we'll get an answer. So absolutely. I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Councilmember Jeff McKim asked about the expenditures and if they were one-time purchases. Miller responded, and Jail Commander Kyle Gibbons added more details about what has led to the recent increase in expenses.
Since the expenditures are greater than the revenue, obviously they're spending down existing balance. Is that going to be an issue, or were some of the equipment charges essentially one-time expenses?
There were a number of items, equipment purchased that were one-time expenses. So we do project that balance to actually grow quite a bit. We are, and sure.
So some of the issue originally was, in terms of housing, we house about, on the average right now, 60 to 75 more people. So mats, inmate uniforms, hygiene stuff. We spent a lot of money, actually more than we anticipated, on whites, shirts, underwear, bras, all of those things. So what we're trying to do is figure out a way, if you're here for a certain amount of time, we can take some of that back, launder it, unless you need it when you leave. If you come in with things, we make sure you leave with things, but if you don't, then you leave with the things that we purchased. So we're trying to find a way to recycle some of that cost, and you'll see that our sum go up, so.
Later during the meeting, Convention and Visitors Commission member Michael Campbell asked the council to approve an additional appropriation of funds for the Karst Turf Project.
On November the 28th, the Convention and Visitors Commission voted to approve an additional allocation for $500,000 out of our general fund for this important development in our community. This reinvestment in our community will add to all of our quality of life. It will also help us, this community, recruit tournaments and draw events to our county, promoting tourism, and allow for the economic benefits of tourism to continue to bear fruit. While the CVC remains committed to the expansion of the convention center as the single biggest priority, this project was an opportunity for our community we could not pass up. We asked for the additional request of $500,000 from the general fund. This is in addition to our 2024 budget. These funds, as a reminder, come fully from the innkeeper's tax, which is collected from hotels, motels, bed and breakfasts, and short-term rentals. I want to assure you that the general fund is at a level it can provide this allocation and still meet all our budgeted allocations and commitments for 2024, and allow us to plan for the needs and requirements for the CVC as we move into planning for an expanded convention center.
The council voted unanimously to approve the appropriation of funds for the project. On January 23rd, several parents, staff, and community members attended the Monroe County Community School Corporation Board meeting to express their opinions about the elementary school consolidation plan proposed by Superintendent Jeff Hauswald this past December. Hauswald's proposal suggested 2 potential mergers with the goal of balancing the socioeconomic status within the school district. The first would combine Templeton Elementary and Childs Elementary students, where Childs Elementary would house pre-K to 2nd grade, and Templeton Elementary would house 3rd grade to 6th grade. The second would combine University Elementary and Fairview Elementary students, where University Elementary would house pre-K to 3rd grade, and Fairview Elementary would house 4th grade to 6th grade. Parent to 2 Templeton Elementary students and spouse to a Templeton Elementary teacher, Colleen Rose, spoke for the proposal, briefly discussing the differences in test scores, socioeconomic status, and PTO funding between Templeton and Childs Elementary.
I hope that a progressive school board takes progressive action. I hope that this progressive community affirms and supports efforts to send our children to integrated schools. I fear that privileged voices will drown the viability of a merger in a million micro-arguments focused on inconvenience and timing, and in doing so, continue to kick this can down the road.
Community member Nathaniel Groh spoke out against the proposal, highlighting disparities between the schools chosen and not chosen for consolidation, and explaining that the problem at hand needed more analysis, explanation, and discussion among the community.
Ultimately, if you're going to do this, it needs to be a district-wide solution that ensures that the benefits and the burdens of this process are shared equally amongst all families in the district. Arbitrarily selecting a handful of winners and losers and continuing to do business as usual otherwise, that's not equity. This is a district-wide problem. It demands a district-wide solution. Please do not move forward on this current proposal. Thank you.
MCCSC Board Assistant Secretary Ashley Pirani reassured members that the board has been transparent with them and recognized that the change takes time.
But that's it. It's just a proposal. It's just a beginning point for us to springboard off and have this conversation. I'm also glad so many of you stayed to continue this conversation.
Board member Brandon Schur moved to add conversations about consolidating Childs and Templeton Elementary and county-wide redistricting to the March agenda. In the meantime, board members agreed to hold parent forums, teacher forums, and an online question portal to encourage conversations about the topics amongst the community. During the January 22nd meeting of the Bloomington Redevelopment Commission, the commissioners heard 3 contract proposals for renovations to the city's Showers West building. This is the next step in an initiative to relocate police and fire headquarters to City Hall. City Attorney Larry Allen walked through the resolutions before the commission and noted that some of the current tenants are not keen to move out early.
These 4 resolutions, and this one included, are part of your ownership of what's now called Showers West, purchase of that building. As you know, there are existing tenants in that. The current administration, we had discussion about that at the end of last year about whether we wanted to go ahead and approve contracts and move forward. The RDC chose to wait and postpone the consideration of contracts to its February meeting. The new administration currently is reviewing the use of that building. It does anticipate using it in some way, and part of the direction, of course, Corporation Counsel Margie Rice is here, so she could correct me and fill in any details that I miss, of course. Our direction has been to continue as we are moving forward, at least with the lease terminations, because we do anticipate transforming the use of the building over time into some city use, is the current thinking. That has not been finalized yet in terms of what that will look like. Staff is still evaluating that. The mayor's office is still evaluating that, so there will be more considerations. But these 4 resolutions are essentially to, as part of the discussions, these were people that were willing to terminate their lease early to vacate some office space and free it up within the building. And so we've negotiated lease terminations with each of these 4. The first one for your consideration is with Kerr Law. This is a fairly small office, and we negotiated a lease termination here. It's actually part of what would be, at least what in the original plans would potentially be part of the fire administration portion of the building, which is mostly office space, I believe, on that side of the building. In this case, the termination is for $5,000, which is essentially covering the moving cost for early termination, and then just releasing of the lease.
Commission member John West asked about how the transition to the new mayoral administration has impacted the project. Allen responded.
I think one of the things is there's still a viable option potentially on the table to go forward with some renovations even fairly quickly this year, and these are negotiations that have been occurring over the course of months with these tenants, and so to even have that still on the table, we thought it prudent to move forward as we had planned with the lease terminations. Of course, we did collect essentially a full year of lease payments. That was one of the interest those prior advances to try to maximize revenue.
Corporation Counsel Margie Rice followed up on the points made by Allen, saying that some tenants are ready to move out, while at least a half a dozen others prefer to stay.
The leases that are before you tonight, though, for terminations, my understanding from talking to Chris Cockrum, who's an agent that's been helping us, that these people are ready. They've made up their mind. They're ready to move on to a new facility, and they're a little reluctant to sign new leases while this is hanging out here. So this group is ready to go, and if we weren't to approve them, I think we'd be holding them back from doing what they want to do. Now, there is a group still of people that have not yet wrapped their heads around leaving the Showers West, and so we're going to continue to talk with Chris and talk with those people, and it may be that those groups stay longer. So that's still some of those people who were told, hey, you're going to have to be out by January 31st are not packing up right now. They're not planning on leaving. And so we're going to continue to have conversations with them about what that looks like. It doesn't look as if we'll be in any, in any shape to be moving in there at the end of the month. So I would expect that we'll continue to let them stay there a little bit longer until we figure out what they want to do and what makes sense for us.
All 4 resolutions failed due to a lack of a second. The Ellettsville Town Council met on January 22nd to discuss a new initiative, Ordinance 2024-02, a plan for implementing a new e-commerce utilities platform to pay bills and transfer funds online.
The utilities clerk asked me to prepare this ordinance to allow them to use what's called an e-commerce platform or online business platform for paying bills, doing direct deposits for payroll, and also to process utility payments. And the town already has an ordinance in place that allows for ACH, automatic clearinghouse transactions, and electronic funds transferred, and I just took that ordinance and tinkered with it and just added some language to make clear that it could also be used to change funds, transfer funds, do lateral transfers between accounts. It would allow utility payments to be processed and would allow the utilities clerk to use those services in addition to the town clerk treasurer.
Councilmember William Ellis asked if the platform would allow residents to pay their utility bills online with their bank information. Deputy Clerk Noel Conyer responded affirmatively, saying that the platform would make it easier for customers to set up and track payments. The town is already paying for most of the services required for the platform.
The additional cost right now, we would have to initially buy the machine, and Gary Brindley, who I'm working with at People's State Bank, has said that the machine to rent it would be $30 a month, or we can buy it outright for $500, and that's the machine that would be able to actually run the checks for the utility payment side. And we already have business online set up. We've just not utilized the platform. So we've actually been paying for some of those services that we're just not utilizing. So the total figure I don't have exactly yet, because we're gonna pay on what we actually use versus just the lump sum that we've been paying and not utilizing.
The council ultimately decided to table Ordinance 2024-02 until their next meeting. Next, the council discussed approving the hiring of 2 new employees for the Department of Public Works. The first position, called Labor 1, is an existing position that needs to be filled. The second, Labor 2, is a new position without currently authorized funds budgeted towards its salary. Town Manager Mike Farmer clarified that the first-year salary for Labor 2 was planned to be covered by the current DNR Next Level Trails grant. Farmer further explained that after the grant runs out, the recent increase in water rates is supposed to cover the salary for Labor 2 in the future.
The Labor 2 is a new position. We've had it in the Next Level Trail grant narrative from the beginning that we would hire 2 people to help process that construction project. And so we also we'll be hiring another additional employee in the future. It runs a dual path with the water rate increase, which we added. We were going to add 2 employees to that as well. So this is in the budget for both positions, the Next Level Trail and the water rates.
Farmer requested that the funds for Labor 2 be authorized by the clerk's office to proceed with the hiring process. The council approved the hire of Labor 1 and approved permission to hire Labor 2 while salary funding is pending authorization. And that is all for CATSweek. Thank you for joining us. For CATS and WFHB, I'm Annalise Poorman.